for tuning in to the ABC Music Talk podcast, the show for anyone interested in the music industry. This episode is focused on you, the music business professional. My guest is a career coach who helps her clients understand themselves and their mission in life. Hence the title, Mission Possible. But first, time to remind you all to go road to your videos. Rota is for artists, managers, labels, or anyone in the music industry who needs to create video content for promotion or monetization. Rota makes it fast, easy, and inexpensive to do all of that in one place. Head to www.abcmusic.co and click the Rota logo on the homepage to access a 10% off discount for the service. Welcome to the show, founder of Olympia Coaching, Ariane Paris.
Thank you, Alex. I'm really pleased to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you so much. And listeners, once again, this is one of those ones I'm recording not in real life, so to speak. We're doing it over the wire. So if there are any technical sound gremlins, then that's just how it is in life. But I'm sure you're all very used to it because you're all in the same boat. Good. So where are you calling from today?
I'm calling from Barcelona in Spain.
Barcelona, right. Okay. But
Yes.
But not Spanish.
No, I'm half French, half Greek, lived in London and then relocated to Barcelona.
Wonderful, wonderful. Actually, all of the literal holiday hotspots there. So well done, you. Okay, so I am comfortably in my 40s and I've only ever worked in the music industry and I've never really considered a careers coach before. How would you best describe what it is that you do?
So I help people, whether they are artists or music professionals, first of all, get really clear on what they want, what is important to them in their career, because quite often when we want to work in the music industry, we just look for a job, we apply for jobs, we don't really spend time to stop and really figure out what is really important to me, what are my values, how do I define success, and what is my mission, what is my purpose in life. And I think when you're young, it's not questions you may be asking yourself, but when you get into your 30s and your 40s, these are the kind of questions you may want to ask yourself in order to take the right decisions when it comes to your career. So I help people, get really clear on that, regain their confidence when they lost a little bit of that confidence. It's quite hard sometimes to find a job in the industry, whether that is to break in the industry or in the current situation, as we all know. There's been so much furlough and people losing their jobs. So it's helping them also regain that sense of confidence and understanding what they're great at, what their unique set of skills is, so they can also sell themselves, promote themselves better when it comes to finding a new job.
So it is a mixture of people that are, like myself, a little far on into their careers as much as it is people that are actually looking to break in. I mean, because obviously you've got to get to a point where you feel like you might need that sort of help and guidance.
Yes, correct. And we, like in the US, a lot of my clients are actually based in the US, where it's much more common and usual to hire a coach. I think in Europe we're still lagging a little bit behind, but it's becoming more common for people to just get help, get support, so you can get to the next level more easily and more quickly.
I was gonna pick up on that because I think careers coaching is a little taboo, say in the UK. The concepts of things like counselling and therapy, which is not what you do, but they sort of fall into that sort of bracket of basically asking for help, and Brits are not very good at asking for help. I mean, I apologise for anyone who is British that feels like they're very good at it, but I'm not, and I think I'm fairly sort of typical of that. I mean, is that sort of what you often find?
Yeah, and it's such a shame, right, that it's taboo, and it seems crazy to me, because when you look at all the, whether they are athletes, top performers, artists, CEOs, entrepreneurs, all of these people work with not just one coach, but several coaches. This is why they reach the success that they do. And there's no problem for them. It's not an issue like asking for help. It's like, I want to be great. I want to achieve more. Therefore, I'm going to get hire people in my corner to support me in my dreams.
Yeah.
So it's so weird that it's taboo, because it's quite a cool thing to hire a coach, I feel. And also it means that you're looking to also work on yourself and doing the inner work, which I find is so important.
Well, here's a little insight for my listeners. Some of the most successful people that I work with or know have had some form of careers coaching. So I would suggest you all consider it.
And thank you for sharing that, because I think it helps normalize it and see it as a positive thing.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I had a conversation with a future guest on the show who's quite sort of high ranking in the industry, and he sort of said it as a sort of, I don't tell people this, which is, and I sort of, part of me wonders whether that's just he doesn't want to share the secret sauce, the secret to success. But I think it feeds into that kind of I think but part of the problem with the music industry, and I've talked about this a little bit with some of my other focuses on like mental health in the music industry, there is a fear of looking weak, because it can be quite a sort of masculine type of industry, or at least it used to be when I started in the 90s. I mean, any form of weakness was not, you just avoided that. That was not something you would ever do. And of course, it's not weakness; it's about just being better. And isn't that what we're all here for? Because we're all here to make our artists that we represent, or songwriters, their careers better. And if we're not very good, then how's that going to help?
Exactly. And thankfully the culture is changing, because it's actually the opposite of weakness. Because anyone who has done some sort of therapy, whether it's traditional talk therapy or alternative modes of therapy, or whether that's coaching, everyone who's been through on that journey knows that actually you have to be courageous. You have to be very brave to look at yourself in the mirror and to assess, the things that are no longer working, and how you want to transform and how you want to get better. So actually, it's for the courageous. It's not for the weak to get that help. Yeah, it's the opposite.
I absolutely agree, and that's why I'm so glad that we're getting a chance to do this type of episode to share that type of message, because this podcast is all about sort of education through storytelling, and so what better way to try and explain why this is a good thing rather than something you should be fearful of or worried about. Actually, to that point, can you tell us a little bit how you ended up doing this? Because presumably this is not necessarily one of those sort of go-to jobs. I mean, I know people want to be teachers in the world, and they that's all they ever want to do, or whatever. But this is one of those sort of roles that I don't know that people would necessarily sort of come out of school and go, right, this is what I want to do. But maybe I'm wrong on that. But yeah, tell me your story.
Yeah, that's right. Because I'm actually the same age as you. So at the time, coaching was still in its infancy when we were young. So it's not something that I was thinking about when I was young. In fact, when I was young, music is my first love, as it is, I guess, for most of the guests on your shows. Yeah. So I always wanted to work in the music industry. That's what I wanted to do when I was young, which I did. So I worked in the industry for about 15 years, and it was amazing. So worked in the UK, then I worked as a promoter in Spain for a big venue. And I really enjoyed myself, especially this last job that I had in the industry as a promoter was literally a dream job. It was an amazing position to be in, and having this opportunity to give artists a chance to play in Barcelona for the first time, like booking headline acts as well as underground acts. I was really happy for many, many years. I stayed in that job for 9 years. But in parallel, as I relocated to Spain as well, and the pace of life is different compared to London, as you can imagine. So I had more time in my life. I also turned 30, and at the time, what happened was slowly I started to have a spiritual awakening, and I started to become really passionate about anything to do with personal developments. And I was doing it for myself because what I was learning was just so mind-blowing to me. And also this came from an interest in science, actually. I'm a little bit of a nerd, so I read books on quantum physics and things like that. And it started that way, my journey. And so everything that I was learning, I found so important because it really shifted how I viewed reality, how I viewed my life, this human life that I'm having right now. And I think that all these personal development skills are things we should learn at school, actually. And these are basic life skills that everyone should know about. So what happened was I became really passionate about it. And also following my spiritual awakening and so on, I came to a point where I started to feel really dissatisfied with my job as a promoter. So it had been a dream job for 9 years, but the last few years I started to feel really unfulfilled. I felt really trapped. I felt completely guilty as well to be in that position that so many people would die for. And I just wouldn't enjoy it anymore. I would listen to all these DJ mixes, feeling like, okay, it just all sounds the same. I'm not even excited to book a new artist anymore. And what was happening, I feel that I had a calling. So my soul literally was calling me to do something different, to do something more meaningful. Because for me, my job wasn't meaningful anymore. It had lost its sense of meaning. And I think you cannot live without meaning and purpose in life. And maybe this is something we can talk about a little bit deeper later. And so, yeah, like I thought I was really comfortable in where I was. I knew how to do my job really well. It was a comfortable position. And for me, the pain of staying comfortable was greater than the pain of not following my soul's calling. So I decided to retrain. So I did a professional coaching training. And what I wanted to do really was to bridge the gap between my new passion with personal development and the industry that I love so much, which is the music industry, and help people from this industry. Because when you work in nightlife, as I'm sure you've experienced as well, you can be a witness to a lot of people burning out, a lot of substance abuse, like there's a lot of imbalances in its industry. So I really wanted to help people from the music industry and share what I knew and help them on their journey so they could create the life that they wanted and feel better and perform better.
Yeah, wonderful. What a great sort of way of finding what you want to do in your life. That sounds like that must have been actually a very enjoyable process as well.
Yes, and actually, like now that following what we talked about earlier, what I wanted to say was that I felt trapped for quite a few years before I made that change, because I was full of fear. I was full of limitations, because I was like, okay, I want to work in personal development, but it's not like you can answer a job ad for personal development. No one's going to give you a job. And at the time, it never entered my mind to become an entrepreneur, because I'm not. I didn't start to do this to become an entrepreneur. It's just like something you have to do if you want to become a coach or work in this area. By default, you have to become an entrepreneur. So I felt really stuck for a few years, and I hired a coach. So this is what happened. I hired a coach to help me get unblocked, and that helped me get unblocked, take the first step. And the first step is always the most important step you're going to take. So you take the first step, and then off you go. You take the second one, the third one, and off you go on your journey. So yeah, I did ask for help, and that was what helped me get to where I am today. And I continue to receive coaching, of course, right now.
Oh, excellent. Well, and I think that's the thing, isn't it? That it's, we've talked before, prior to this, and what you do isn't some sort of magic pill that you give to somebody and that's, everything's fixed, everything's great. It is a sort of continual process of, I like the words unblocking and getting yourself unstuck. I think probably a lot of my listeners will be able to relate to that. Okay. As mentioned in the introduction, we're looking at how career coaching helps people to find their mission and make it possible. So where do you typically start with somebody?
So I start where they are at, because I really feel that each person is completely unique. They come from a different starting point. They've got different goals, different things that are holding them back. So all my sessions are entirely bespoke. and they are relevant and tailored to the client's particular objectives and mission and needs and so on. But with purpose and mission, the thing you have to remember is that not everyone, of course, will be aware of what their mission is in life, because I feel that we are in a society that doesn't encourage us to really think about those topics and those things, right? We're still in a very traditional framework of what success is and climbing the career ladder and so on. But it's incredibly important to discover and to feel connected to your mission and to your why, what we call the why, your big why, because this is what's going to give you a sense of meaning, a sense of purpose. This is what's going to help you feel intrinsically happy and fulfilled. And of course, when you're connected to your mission, then you're going to be able to stay motivated, stay driven, and keep going when challenges appear and when setbacks appear as well. Where I start is just by asking my clients a lot of questions, right? So okay. I guide them through some exercises, some visualizations, so ways to access your right brain, which is the creative part of your brain, to help unlock what is this mission that your soul is trying to fulfill here.
Very good. Okay, so it's a concentration on the individual, where they're at, asking them questions, and again that sort of feeds into that idea that this isn't some sort of magic path. Like there's not and here's the textbook on how to be successful. Good luck. Mm-hmm. It's not like it's I think a lot of people probably feel very lonely in their careers. Despite the fact they may have a lot of people that they like and they surround themselves with, but kind of feeding back into that idea of showing weakness at any point. Whenever you discuss any problems that you're having with somebody else, that person has to be somebody that you really do trust, because that's your reputation. That's how people will judge you, if that is something that's common knowledge. And it's a small industry and people talk. So sort of in this sort of environment where it is very, very structured and very focused on just sort of unpicking what's going on. I think it's a process that a lot of people probably should go through themselves. So defining success, so that's not simple. I mean, how do you start with that? Because that feels like a focus that when somebody decides what they want to do in their life, they probably have a version of what success looks like. I mean, how do you help them define their own version of success?
Again, through a lot of questions and coaching exercises and so on. And what I find is that people in the music industry are very ambitious. They're driven, they want to achieve great things. Most people want to be successful, but they don't really spend the time to really define in detail what success looks and feels like to them, right? They don't spend the time. So what happens is that you can always be chasing success, but you're never going to know if you arrive there, because first of all, you didn't define it. And also you may have a goal, and and we all know from experience, anyone who's lived long enough, we know that the goalpost is always moving. You never reach a point where you're like, okay, that's great, I'm happy, I'm successful, that's it, I'm done, I can be happy finally. No, the goalpost is always moving. And I saw a video actually with Ed Sheeran, who's obviously an incredibly successful artist. And the interviewer asked him, how does it feel then to have achieved all your big goals? And Ed Sheeran's response was actually quite interesting. He said, actually, you feel very strange. It's a very odd thing, because here you are, you've sold out Wembley 3 times in a row, or however many times that was. And you're just sitting there thinking, okay, well, what's next? What do I do now? So you don't actually feel what you thought you were going to feel. And that is key. So in order to define success, you really want to define, okay, what does it look like? How does it feel like? What does my ideal day looks like? What am I doing? What am I not doing? Who am I with? What kind of how do I spend my time? How do I want to feel on a daily basis? People don't ask themselves, how peaceful I am. Do I want to run around feeling stressed and anxious all the time? No. but like probably a lot of people are feeling that way, right? Like how is my peace of mind? How creative am I being? Like what do I need to experience in order to really feel successful?
Yeah, well, and of course, feelings, have that sort of connotation of, that's something you don't talk to people about. I mean, being a man, and men are the worst at doing that. But it's funny actually, as you get older, you do start to talk about those things with your friends that you would never have done, at the beginning. And the industry, as we said before, had been, and often still is, quite a sort of masculine kind of environment. And the idea of talking to talking about your feelings to anyone is not something you would do. But of course, everybody has feelings.
Yeah, but also like look, like have this little thought experiment with me.
Okay.
What you truly want, what anyone wants, is not success. It's not success. It's what you think success will give you. And what you think success will give you, you think is going to make you feel a certain way. What you're truly reaching for is the feeling behind the thing that you think success is going to give you. I don't know, maybe that's a bit confusing, but that's what you want, because you imagine, like, I don't know what your bigger goal is. Imagine you're an artist and your biggest goal is to play Wembley, right? What you want is not to play Wembley. What you want is like how you're going to like experience that event and how you're going to feel. Maybe you're going to feel, super achieved, or you're going to feel very proud or
validated,
whatever that is, what you're looking for, and of course deep down what you're looking for is to feel happy, because that's what all human beings want, is to feel happy and to feel fulfilled. That's what we want. So it's all about the feeling.
It's a really good example of breaking something down to something that you would actually understand and can relate to. And I think that by the sounds of things, what you're saying is that what you do is you help people do that and get to that point. And it's always going to be a very personal journey, right? It's going to be a very
completely personal.
Yeah.
And that's why I think it's really important for each person to define success for themselves.
Yeah.
Because if you just look at success in the traditional sense of just want to make lots of money, I want to like have status, climb the career ladder, you're just copying a very outdated model of success, right? And millennials know this. Millennials are all about creating experiences, having impact, having meaning and purpose. This is like one of the biggest things for the younger generation.
Some of these words are really interesting, because when we spoke before, you gave me the word contribution, and that really helped me understand the value with what I do. And I mean, how central is that word, for example, to somebody's mission, going back to this mission possible concept that we have?
Yeah. Your highest mission, really deep down, is always going to be about contributing. So there's actually a Yale researcher. I'm not going to give you the name because it's very complicated. I'm not going to be able to pronounce it. But she divided the concept of career in three. So there's the jobs, the careers, and the callings. So the job is just a means to an end. You just like need money to pay your rent. That's it. A career, where a lot of people may find themselves in, is where you enjoy your work, but your primary motivation is advancement. So you want to get better at your job, you want to maybe reach bigger goals, bigger income goals, like a bigger role, climb the ladder, and so on. And then you have the calling, which is when you do work which is completely aligned with your values, as in like what you find important in life, and in a way that contributes somehow, in whatever shape or form that takes for you. But it's like a way of contributing to the world, to essentially make the world a better place, right? In a way that is meaningful to you. And that's going to be different for everyone. So contribution is actually completely linked to your mission and to your purpose. Like, how do you want to contribute? What's the impact you want to have in the music industry, in the world? How do you want to change the world?
Yeah, it's so interesting how language is so useful in this process, because you've got to define things that I think for a lot of people are just wrapped up into, as we sort of began this, with this idea of success. Oh, I just want to be successful, and then they have, they believe that they understand what that actually means to them, but they don't, because they haven't defined what their contribution is to their mission. And I mean, I studied communication studies at A level, and things like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And so I have a little bit of that sort of knowledge of how to break those things down. But it's not common knowledge. It's not what most people have in their heads. And therefore they attach it to basic things like money, like position, like job title. I've had that discussion with people about job titles, and one of the companies that I work with, the CEO he's getting less this way because the company's getting much bigger. But certainly for a while it was, what job title do you want? Like, what do you think is going to help you out there in the world so that you can do more for the company? That was the approach, and that you can do that when you're in a smaller organization, and of course that becomes much harder when you have more people, because you've got to at some point make some delineation between departments, between hierarchy and all the rest of it. I'll never forget sort of moments of going to Midem for many years, and there was a point where the attendees changed. It ceased to become as much about A&R and label managers and distribution, and suddenly some of the venues where you'd sort of huddle afterwards for a drink would just be full of founders and CEOs, and everybody you met was a founder or a CEO. And actually, it's for me at that point, it really started to lose any meaning, like that title, and of course Silicon Valley has been a great accelerator of that, because literally everybody's a founder or a CEO. But whatever. There's a lot of common themes, I believe, because we've had a lengthy discussion before all of this, and you touched on something before about the idea that globally we've all just experienced a pandemic, and in the UK, I don't know about other countries, but in the UK at least, a lot of people have been put onto furlough schemes, and so it's a weird sort of pause button. I think probably a lot of people have experienced that's been pushed, and for some people they're still in that state, and they're now getting, our government's excellent at providing confusing messaging, but they're sort of half in, half out at the moment as well, or not at all, or completely out, and the rest of the world isn't. And that furlough concept has either resulted in them actually eventually losing their job, but so there's that sort of form of rejection, or I know that I spoke to a lawyer, and he said that he was on part furlough, whereas other people weren't. And so then you've got these kind of workforces that started to get divided, depending on what the job was, or whether they could actually attend work, or whether the business was still operating. But so rejection was part of it. Feeling of loss as well, and loss of identity, and your self-worth takes a hit. And one of the other things that I don't know if you found this with the people that you work with, but have they also lost their support network? As in like the people that they were surrounded by, but they no longer could actually go and see them. They could no longer spend time with them, and regardless of how great Zoom and other video conferencing applications are available, it's not the same thing. It isn't the same thing as having those moments with people in real life. Has that been a bit of a theme that you've seen?
Yeah, and then like what you said is completely right. It's really difficult, right, when your job is being taken away from you, as it has been for so many music industry people or artists over the pandemic. And again, in our society, we tend to define ourselves with what we do and how productive we are, and what we achieve, and our job title and so on, which can lead to some issues, like when you say, like you said, when it's been taken away, then you feel a sense of grief, or a sense of loss, like feeling rejected. There can even be like some shame associated around that, of like being jobless, and definitely your self-worth is taking a hit, because again we associate our self-worth with what we do, which is an error. And on top of it, like you said, we have been isolated, and as human beings, we crave human connection. And in the music industry, our social life is heavily linked to our career, right? Like we do business with people we hang out with, we mix. We relate to people on a social level, but also on a professional level. And we also, we used to go to events and to clubs and to festivals, and suddenly we're all at home, and we're going through this collective journey together of having more time, more space to sit and to not be so distracted by the usual busyness and craziness of life, and suddenly sitting with yourself and having more time to reassess where you're at and what your priorities are and what's important, what's not important. And yeah, so it is definitely a journey.
One of the other things that we talked about before was this idea, and you mentioned it briefly there, which was this idea of the shared identity. So the identity is you as an individual, but that can often get wrapped up into the job that you do, or the position that you hold, or what you believe you represent to other people. And you said something when we spoke before, something around it can limit authentic human interaction. I just wondered if you could sort of revisit that a little bit.
Yes. So as soon as you put yourself in a box because you attach a label to who you think you are, then you're limiting yourself automatically, right? And maybe then you feel like you have to relate to other people according to this label of who you are, like you are a promoter, you are an artist, whatever. So that is limiting. And also you have to, if you go a little bit deeper, you have to understand that you are not your job, you are not your role. And this is another reason why when suddenly that has been taken away from you, suddenly, maybe a little bit of status, you feel like you've lost a little bit of status, and you find yourself feeling a little bit confused as to like, who am I then without my job? And this is where this is a kind of the type of exercise I would give to a client, would be to ask them to describe themselves without a job, without a career title, without any label like your profession, the industry you work in, even your nationality, your marital status, and so on. So really digging deeper to understand what makes you you, and who are you when you don't have any of those labels attached to yourself. And the reason why it can be limiting is that if you've been furloughed and you need to somehow pivot slightly your career, or maybe the time you've had with more space and time to think has made you realize that you don't want to do the same job, your priorities have changed, and so you want to like start with a blank canvas and a blank page, so you can really be open to an infinite amount of possibilities of what can be available to you in terms of a career change, and not limiting yourself to the label of the thing that you used to do in the past, right? Because that doesn't define you. So stripping ourselves away from all these labels help us, first of all, really understand who, like the human being that we are below those labels, and also being open to more possibilities when it comes to finding a new career or a new job.
Understood. That's great. There's also a sense of belonging that we've talked about, and I liked the example you gave, like Googlers. People identify who work for Google as Googlers.
Yeah.
How important is that to people? Like, and is it something that you would advocate for, or is it something that you should avoid?
I think belonging, like feeling like we belong, is one of the most basic needs of human beings. We're a tribal people. We want to feel like we belong, and this is why it's another reason why when you work in the music industry and suddenly your job has come to a halt, you lose that sense of belonging. So I think we can't really avoid it. It's one of the basic human needs. And you mentioned the Maslow's pyramid of needs before. There's a pyramid that was adapted from that one, that a guy called Chip Conley created. He's an entrepreneur. He was consulting for Airbnb. He's also an author. And he made a pyramid as it comes to the career, someone's career. And so at the bottom of the pyramid, you've got the survival needs, which are the most basic needs that we need to have covered. So having a job in order to meet your physiological and your safety needs, so you can, have money to pay your rent, feed yourself, feel somehow stable and safe. Although all of those things are like what we call perceived certainty, because it's only a perception, nothing is ever certain. This is the most basic needs. And then in the middle of the pyramid, you have the needs of social belonging, self-esteem. So this is where your job provides you with a sense of feeling like you belong, you're part of a tribe, you feel like recognized for what you do, you feel needed, you feel worthy because you do this, this purposeful job and so on. And so this is a basic need. You can't avoid it, right? Like it's a basic need, and it's also needs, and there's nothing wrong with that, but these are needs based on that come from the ego. And when I say ego, we all have an ego, right? Like it's not just like, it's ego in the sense of like sense of self. So these are ego needs: wanting to be acknowledged, wanting to be recognized, feeling worthy, and so on. And once you have those covered, you go to the top part of the pyramid, which are the highest needs. And Chip Conley calls this part transform, and this is where self-actualization comes in. So once you have the basic needs covered, the survival needs, the self-esteem needs, and the belonging needs, then you can go to the next level, which is self-actualization, which is where you want to, this deep desire that all human beings have to really grow personally, intellectually, emotionally, really being able to reach your full potential, using your full creative power. And this is also where you want to contribute and you want to serve in whatever way is meaningful to you and gives you pleasure and joy, right? Like this is where you transcend the ego needs and you go to the soul's needs, where it's all about wanting to feel fulfilled, wanting to contribute, wanting to make a difference, like to have your life serve a purpose.
This is a really good example of how complex and intricate what you do for a living is, because I introduced this idea of a sense of belonging. I think for most people that certainly I've ever come across in the music industry, they could feel like they understand that. But what you've just done is broken that down to a much more granular level, and really, I think understanding those things could be so beneficial to so many people. So I really appreciate you sharing that with my listeners. Is there a sort of a pattern to the advice that you give? Like, do you find that this we talked about it being a very personal thing, but is there a pattern to the advice? Is it a process that you've just got to kind of take people on? Like, is it like a literal journey of, or like a book, maybe, like you start at chapter 1 and you kind of get through to the end, or is it not quite like that? Is it much more a sort of, oh god, this is showing my age. There was some choose your own adventure books where you could get does that ring bells to you?
Okay, I love those books.
Good, I'm not alone in that, but yeah, it was that sort of process of, you could choose that and then the story would be something completely different. So with the work that you do you find that you're normally finding common misconceptions that people have about themselves and about where they're at and all the rest of it, and you can just kind of step through this process with them, and whilst the results will be different for each individual person, the point is that they get to the point of happiness, right? I guess.
Yeah So it's not a linear process, and I really feel as well with coaching it's as much a science, so to speak, as much as it is an art. Right? It's really, there's not like one thing that I get people through in order to get a certain result. There's many different things we're going to address, like, definition of success, what is important to you, what are your values, what are your goals, what is your vision for the future, addressing the typical fears that people may have, or the typical limitations in their thinking that people may have. So these are common elements. There is no linear process, but the one thing that is the one pattern, if I can't really call this a pattern, but the one thing that is common with everyone is really helping people make that journey inwards, right? It's all about going inwards, because again, we are always encouraged to go outwards, to pay attention to the external things, to pay attention to what everyone else is doing, and comparing yourself and like just reacting to whatever is happening on the outside. And this is the crucial step that people miss. If you're looking to change your career, if you're looking to find a new job, it's not just about getting someone to rework your LinkedIn and just applying to some random jobs. This is not the way. I mean, what I want to say is that may not lead you to where you want to actually go, right? And which is to have a job that makes you feel excited, purposeful, passionate, fulfilled, and so on. So it's all about going inwards. It's helping people take that journey inwards so they can reconnect with what they already know, but they don't know they know. Yeah. and ask themselves all those questions that no one is teaching us to ask ourselves.
Yeah, it's interesting that the example that you just gave of just updating your LinkedIn and applying for a bunch of jobs. I think that's where there is a difference, and not everybody sees it this way, but there's a difference between having a job and having a career. And I think that, I mean, obviously for so many people, myself included, you need an income, right? You need to earn money. And so this idea of I've got to go and get employment somewhere, because otherwise how do I function as a human being on this planet that requires money? I've got to live somewhere, I've got to eat, etc. And that sort of a sense of, needing to get that solved quickly is often so much of the reasons why people do exactly what you just described, which is I'll go to my LinkedIn and I will make sure that looks good, and then I will just start applying for jobs. And that's essentially what you're saying. It's like, sure, go do that if you need to do that, but the likelihood is that in 6 months, a year's time, you're going to be in that job going, this doesn't feel right. Like, what have I done? And wouldn't it be better if they could find that headspace to go, what is it actually that's going to make me feel like good about myself?
Yes, and I think, of course, like, you have to have your basic needs covered, like we talked about before. So go and get the job if you need to pay your rent, for sure. Go get a part-time job. Do anything that it takes in order to meet your basic needs. And after, or in parallel, so it's not either or, it's like this, and also take the time to self-reflect and understand really what you want your life and your career to be about, and why, and what is your mission, what is important to you. Because what's going to happen otherwise is that this is what we used to call the midlife crisis. You come to a point in your life,
I think we still call it that, I'd say. Yeah.
And maybe it's going to happen in your 30s, in your 40s, when you're going to sit there thinking, oh my God, like, it doesn't feel right. Something's missing. Like, I feel like I'm not really where I should be. I'm not doing what I should be doing. And this is a crisis is going to come, and then you're going to have to do that work anyhow. So I wish personally that I had that knowledge and those tools when I was younger. Although, we lived our life, we were young, it was, I didn't ask myself those questions when I was younger. But I find that the younger generations are much more switched on and ask themselves those questions much younger now.
There's hope for the future then.
Yeah, and it's all about, like, of course you need a job to pay your rent, and also you want to have a fulfilling, exciting, passionate job, right? There's another quote that I love by Tony Robbins, who you might have heard of. He's like a really famous coach. Yeah. And it says something like, success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure.
Success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure. That's really interesting. And that's a pretty good way of describing exactly what we've just been talking about.
Yeah. And he says because you may achieve all these external goals that you think you wanted, but if you don't have a sense of meaning in your life, then something is missing, and it's gonna be painful. And that's what happened to me in my job as a promoter. I loved this job for so many years, and then it came to a point where I felt empty, I felt trapped, I felt unfulfilled, and then it drains you. It starts to affect your health because you have no energy, you have no motivation. Of course, you're not going to be great at your job as a result. And in order to find your passion again, maybe you either need to realign to something that's more in line with who you are today, because also I feel like as you evolve in life, as you grow as a person, you also need a career that grows alongside you, that's going to reflect who you are being and how you are transforming.
Really, really interesting. Okay, so we're nearing the end of the time, which is amazing. It's flown by. So let's just, have you got any top tips I was trying to think about how to frame this, like top tips in terms of identifying in yourself, that you might need to go and find a careers coach, and also maybe some top tips to actually just like make a start in taking that. Maybe even it's a bit like hitting a pause button and then reflecting, and not kind of keep pushing forward all the time. Mm-hmm. How would you expect people to sort of try and look at this in their lives?
So definitely, if you feel stuck, if you feel like you're not doing the job you want to be doing, if you find it really hard to get to the next level, if you realize you have maybe some feelings of insecurities or some fears that are stopping you, that are getting in your way of doing certain things, then definitely this is the right moment to go and hire a coach. If you feel at a transition point in your life or in your career, and you're not sure which way to go, you're not sure which decisions to take, this is also another great moment to go and hire a coach. And generally speaking, if you want to work on yourself a little bit more because you want to reach more of your potential, you want to, because we can't see our blind spots, right? So if you want to understand what you need to do in order to get to the next level and so on, and find clarity about your direction, all these things, these are great topics to bring to a coach.
Great.
And the way to do that for sure is just take the first steps. So
well, and speaking of first steps, one of the things that I really like about how you do it is you offer a free consultation. So you carve out some time for somebody, no commitments either way, just to see whether or not it's something that might work for them, which is great. And of course, I will be putting links to your website in the show notes and on the socials. So hopefully many of my listeners will just give it a go. Why not?
Exactly. You've got nothing to lose and everything to gain.
There you go. Perfect. Wonderful. Okay. Well, thank you so much for sharing so much knowledge and a different perspective on how people can look at themselves and the world that they are involved with. So I really appreciate that.
Thank you so much, Alex. It was really a pleasure and a real honor to be on this podcast with you.
Well, I don't know about that, but I appreciate you doing it anyway.
I absolutely mean it.
Very good. Okay, so to my listeners, thank you for listening. As ever, I welcome all feedback, comments, and suggestions for future shows. My Twitter and Instagram handle is @AlexBranson, or head to the website abcmusic.co, where you'll find a contact page to contact me on.